In the year 2000, two men flew to Dallas with an offer that could have changed the entire future of entertainment. They walked into the headquarters of an empire with 9,000 stores, a company that sat on almost every corner in America, and they made a simple proposal: buy our little company, $50 million. Let us run your online business for you. The executives in that room could barely keep a straight face. The tiny company they were laughing at was called Netflix. 10 years later, the empire would be bankrupt, its shelves stripped bare, and the company it had turned away would be worth more than everything Blockbuster had ever built. This is the story of how Blockbuster owned the future, was handed the chance to keep it, and threw it away, not once, but twice. To understand how far Blockbuster fell, you have to understand how fast it rose. It began in 1985 in Dallas, Texas. A man named David Cook opened a single video rental store, and he did something clever that nobody else in the business was doing. Cook came from the world of software and data, and he used a computer system to track thousands of tapes at once. That meant his store could stock far more titles than the small mom-and-pop rental shops of the time, and it could see exactly which movies a neighborhood actually wanted. It was not just a video store. It was a video store run like a technology company. Then, in 1987, a businessman named Wayne Huizenga saw what this could become. Huizenga had already built one fortune in the garbage collection business, and he understood one thing better than almost anyone alive: how to take a single location and multiply it into 1,000. When he took control, there were just 19 Blockbuster stores. What followed was one of the most aggressive expansions in the history of retail. At its fastest, Blockbuster was opening a brand new store every single day. 19 stores became 100, then several hundred, then more than 1,000 in just a few years. That blue and yellow sign spread across America like a wildfire, and driving to Blockbuster on a Friday night became a ritual for an entire generation. By the early 2000s, Blockbuster was not really a company anymore. It was a habit. At its peak around 2004, it had roughly 9,000 stores around the world. It employed about 84,000 people, and it pulled in close to $6 billion a year. 65 million families carried a Blockbuster membership card in their wallet. A decade earlier, in 1994, the media giant Viacom had been so convinced of its power that it bought the entire chain for $8.5 billion. Blockbuster was everywhere, and it felt permanent, the way only truly dominant things do. If you wanted to watch a movie at home, there was really only one place to go. You drove to the store, you walked the aisles under the fluorescent lights, you argued with your family about what to rent, and you prayed the one new release you wanted was still on the shelf. Then you carried your tape or your disc up to the counter. Millions of people did exactly this every single week. Blockbuster did not just rent movies, it owned the way an entire country watched them. And an empire that controls a habit that deep starts to believe, quietly, that it can never be replaced. But the real secret of Blockbuster was not the movies on the shelf. It was a quiet little charge printed at the bottom of the receipt: the late fee. If you kept a movie past its due date, you paid a penalty. And if you forgot for a week, that penalty could cost more than the movie itself. And those fees added up to a staggering amount of money. In the year 2000 alone, Blockbuster collected nearly $800 million in late fees. That was about 16% of its entire revenue. Stop and think about what that number really means. Almost 1 out of every $6 the company earned came not from renting movies, but from charging its own customers for bringing them back late. In a strange way, it was brilliant. Blockbuster had built a machine that made money every time a customer failed. But it was also a trap with the jaws already open, because the company had become quietly addicted to a fee that its customers openly despised. Everyone who had ever paid one remembered the sting. And any competitor who could offer the very same movies with no due dates and no penalties would be pointing a weapon straight at the beating heart of Blockbuster's profits. That competitor was already being built. So when two founders from a small California startup walked into that Dallas boardroom and offered to sell Blockbuster that exact weapon for $50 million, the answer was no. And to be fair, in the moment, it did not look like a mistake. Netflix in the year 2000 was a tiny operation that mailed DVDs in little red envelopes and lost money doing it. Its founders, Reed Hastings and Mark Randolph, sat across from a giant. Why on earth would a giant pay for a struggling minnow? But underneath that reasonable answer was a dangerous kind of blindness. Blockbuster could not imagine giving up the stores, the shelves, and above all the late fees that quietly funded the whole operation. The entire company was designed around one thing: getting people to drive to a physical location and charging them when they were late. A world with no stores and no late fees was not just a different business model. It was a world where Blockbuster's single greatest strength would turn overnight into dead weight. So the empire looked directly at its own future, decided it was a niche not worth owning, and went back to doing what had always worked. For a few more years, it kept working. The profits kept flowing. But the ground had already begun to move under its feet. Through the 2000s, the wave Blockbuster had ignored became a flood. Netflix kept growing, mailing movies with no due dates and no late fees, and then it began building something even more dangerous: the ability to stream films directly over the internet, with no disc at all. And here's the part almost everyone forgets. Blockbuster actually fought back, and for a moment, it was winning. Under its chief executive, John Antioco, the company made two genuinely bold moves. First, in 2005, it did the unthinkable. It announced the end of late fees, deliberately throwing away hundreds of millions of dollars in easy profit in order to stop its customers from leaving. Then, in late 2006, it launched Blockbuster Total Access. It let you rent movies online and then exchange them in any physical store, a combination of internet and storefront that Netflix simply could not match. And it worked. Subscribers poured in by the millions. For one brief, remarkable window, Blockbuster was actually beating Netflix at the very game Netflix had invented. The sleeping giant had woken up, seen the future clearly, and was sprinting toward it. And then, at the worst possible moment, the empire turned on itself. The knife came from inside the boardroom. A powerful activist investor named Carl Icahn had bought his way onto the board, and he clashed with Antioco again and again over how much money this digital war was costing. The end of late fees had cost hundreds of millions. Total Access was cheap for customers, but expensive to run, and the fight between the two men came down to something almost unbelievably small: a dispute over Antioco's bonus. That argument grew so bitter that in 2007, Antioco walked away, and the one leader who had been driving Blockbuster into the future was suddenly gone. His replacement was a former convenience store executive named Jim Keyes, who had run 7-Eleven. Keyes looked at the numbers and pulled back. He raised the price of Total Access, cut its marketing, and turned the company's focus back to its physical stores. The momentum that had almost saved Blockbuster evaporated within months. Netflix kept climbing. Blockbuster began to sink, and the debt left over from years of expansion and acquisitions pressed down harder every single quarter. Finally, on the 23rd of September 2010, the empire that had once opened a store every day filed for bankruptcy, buried under close to $1 billion in debt. The next year, what remained of Blockbuster was sold off at a bankruptcy auction to a satellite television company for a few $100 million. The giant was finished. To see just how avoidable all of this was, you only have to look at the company that had been sitting on the other side of that Dallas conference table. Netflix faced the same market, the same customers, and the same technology. But Netflix asked a completely different question. Blockbuster asked, how do we protect our stores and our fees? Netflix asked, what do people actually want? And the answer, once you were willing to hear it, was obvious. People wanted their movies without the drive, without the due date, and without the punishment. So Netflix let go of the physical world entirely. It moved from mailing discs to streaming them, and then went further still, making its own films and series that the whole world would talk about. The company Blockbuster could have bought for $50 million grew into one of the most valuable entertainment businesses on the planet, worth hundreds of billions of dollars. Two companies, one meeting, one choice. One clung to the comfortable past it already knew. The other ran toward a future it could not yet fully see. Only one of them is still standing today. Here is the part that should haunt every company that believes it is too big to fall. Blockbuster's real tragedy is not that it failed to see the future, It saw it perfectly. It even built the product that could have carried it safely across. And for one shining moment, it was ahead of Netflix. The empire did not die because it was stupid, or slow, or asleep. It died because it could not bring itself to let go of the things that had made it rich, the stores and the fees, and because when the future finally arrived at its door, its own leaders tore up the plan over an argument about one man's bonus. That is the real lesson buried in the rubble. The most dangerous thing an empire can own is a business so profitable that it becomes impossible to give up, even when everyone can already see that it is ending. Blockbuster could not imagine a world without its stores on every corner. So when that world came anyway, the company had already decided, quietly, that it would rather defend the past than build the future. And the future does not wait for anyone. Today, out of 9,000 stores, exactly one Blockbuster is left, a single shop in Bend, Oregon, kept alive as a museum to an empire that chose not to survive. Blockbuster is just one empire that built its own grave while standing at the very top of the world. There are dozens more, giants that were once so certain they could never fall, right up until the day they did. If you want to know who fell next, and exactly how it happened, subscribe, and we will tell you the story of the next empire to be toppled.